Gunshots tore through the stillness of the Dakota plains, ripping the calm autumn air apart, as 6 riders thundered after a single wagon, fleeing across the open prairie. October 15th, 1879 would later be spoken of as a turning point, though no one chasing or running that day could have foreseen what it would set in motion. Clara Winrow clutched the reins with torn, bleeding hands, her father's aging mare straining against the harness while bullets screamed past her ears. The ripped blue skirt of her finest dress snapped violently in the wind, her dark hair torn loose from its pins, streaming behind her like a banner of defiance. Behind her, Vance Mercer's gunmen closed in fast, their fresh horses eating up the ground. Her thoughts jerked backward to the night before, when she had slipped through death by inches at Willow Creek, escaping Flint Rourke's trap. She had been watering her horse, believing herself far enough from the trail to be safe, when the sharp metallic click of a rifle bolt sounded behind her. End of the road, girl. Flint Rourke's scarred face twisted into a smile without warmth. Mr. Mercer's shown patience, but even good men run out of it. Clara raised her hands slowly, playing the part of a surrender, edging closer to the creek's bank. When Flint stepped in to seize her wrists, she hurled a fistful of sand straight into his eyes and threw herself backward into the water. The current carried her away under cover of darkness, while curses and gunfire echoed uselessly behind her. She had lost her boots and cloak, but gained hours Mercer's men could never recover. Now the mare stumbled again, near collapse, and Clara felt the memory of her father's final words press against her chest like a brand. 3 months earlier, on the night before his death, Silas Winrow had forced a leather satchel into her hands, his fingers shaking. "Listen to me," he had whispered. "If anything happens, take these papers to the territorial capital. Show them to honest men, editors, anyone who will listen." "Papa, you're scaring me," she had said. He cupped her cheek gently. "Mercer is poison in this land, Clara. These documents are the cure." She begged him to destroy them, to run west, to start over somewhere safe. Silas shook his head, his voice hardening. "Some things are worth dying for. Justice is one. Protecting my daughter is another." They found his body the next morning by his favorite fishing spot, said he'd been thrown from his horse. But the horse came home untouched, and Dr. Henry Cole found the bullet lodged deep in Silas Winrow's back. "There's nowhere left to run." Flint Rourke's voice snapped Clara back to the present as another rifle shot shattered the wagon seat beside her. He had hunted her for 3 days now, ever since she fled Mercer's ranch, with the evidence that could destroy him. "Mr. Mercer's patience is gone," Flint shouted. Clara ducked low, choking on dust and fear, forcing the mare toward the cottonwoods, lining Ash River. If the stories were true, safety lay there. If Agnes Crowley hadn't been wrong about an Apache camp hidden along the river bends. The wagon wheel struck a prairie dog hole with a crack like snapping bone. The wagon lurched violently, flinging Clara into the grass. She rolled, clutching her father's satchel tight as the mare screamed, tangled in shattered harness. "She's down!" someone yelled. Hank Dobbs kicked his horse forward, revolver drawn. $5 to the man who brings her back breathing. Clara plunged into the cottonwoods as shots tore through branches above her head. Thorns ripped her skin, but she ran until the trees opened into a clearing. Painted teepees stood in a wide circle, buffalo hide walls glowing in the afternoon light. Smoke drifted from cook fires. Voices carried in the flowing cadence of the Apache tongue. Without hesitation, Clara staggered to the largest lodge and pushed through, the flap collapsing onto soft buffalo robes. Inside, warmth wrapped around her. Firelight flickered over sage and leather. She was still gasping when the flap shifted again. A tall man stepped inside, water glistening on the copper skin, long black hair falling over broad shoulders. Firelight revealed a scar cutting from temple to jaw, and eyes that locked onto her with calm, lethal focus. Coda had been watering his horses at the river when the gunshots echoed across the valley. And now, standing in his lodge, he found a white woman, crouched on his bedding, wounded, cornered, and refusing to surrender. He had left his lodge that morning, certain it would stand empty when he returned. Instead, a white woman was curled low on his bedding, drawn tight as a wounded sparrow, green eyes wide with fear and something harder beneath it. Resolve, perhaps, or the simple refusal to break. Outside, harsh voices pressed closer, sharp with intent. Check every lodge. She's hiding here somewhere. Fan out, don't let her reach the river. Koda's jaw set. He knew that sound. The sound of hunters closing in. Men who took what they wanted and let law and mercy trail behind them. He had heard it 2 winters ago when riders burned the Apache food stores at Standing Bear Creek, when they shot his sister Sira in the back as she tried to save the winter supplies. Some nights her face still came to him in silence, as if her spirit refused to rest without justice. He moved calmly, one hand reaching for the Winchester resting against the curved lodge wall. The woman flinched when he stepped closer, her fingers drifting toward her waist, a small pistol. He noted it with quiet approval. Fear had not stripped her of courage. "Do not move," he said, his English careful and measured, learned from traders and soldiers. His voice was low, steady, leaving no room for doubt as he met her gaze. The searchers were nearly upon them now, boots splashing in the shallows beyond the ring of lodges. The decision settled in him like stone. Under Apache law, if she belonged to him, she was protected. The white men's laws held no power here. Not without starting a war they could not afford, not with federal soldiers stationed at Fort Robinson. Koda leaned closer, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "You belong to me now." The words dropped between them, heavy and final. He saw understanding take shape in her expression. She was educated enough to recognize a legal truth when it appeared. Smart enough to know rescue when it stood before her. "I understand," she whispered, barely louder than the fire. "Thank you." Koda gave a single nod, then rose to his full height. "Stay silent. Stay still. I will deal with this." He stepped out into the falling dusk and faced 6 mounted men at the edge of the camp. Other Apache had already emerged, warriors, moving into place, women ushering children inside. The entire village tightened, ready. "We're looking for a woman," Flint Rourke called out, impatience twisting his scarred face. "White, dark hair, blue dress. She's a thief and a runaway bride. We have legal authority to search these lodges." Koda walked forward, rifle loose in his hands but ready. Behind him, shadows separated into men. His young cousin Kyle, barely 18, held a Spencer carbine with steady hands. Taro, whose war deeds were sung in winter stories. Oren, whose aim had saved the village more times than anyone counted. "This is not your land," Koda said quietly, his English sharp as a blade. "You have no authority here." Flint's hand drifted toward his pistol. "We know she came this way, her wagons wrecked by the river. Blood leads straight to your camp. You can make this easy, or we take her by force." "The woman is under my protection," Koda answered, his voice carrying without effort. "She belongs to me by Apache law. Your law ends at this ground." For a long breath, violence hovered thick in the air. Then one rider, a young man with more fear than hatred, shifted in his saddle and muttered about federal consequences, about Indian agents asking questions. Flint's jaw darkened. Slowly he lowered his hand. "This isn't finished," he spat. "Vance Mercer has reach. He's got friends who don't like Apaches sheltering white women." "Then let him come himself," Koda said evenly. "Let him stand before my people and explain why his men hunt frightened women like animals." The riders turned and vanished into the night. But their threat lingered like spent powder. Koda stood until the last hoofbeat faded, then returned to his lodge knowing tomorrow would bring heavier trials. Inside, Clara Winrow sat exactly where he had left her. Her pistol now rested openly across her knees. She had already chosen to trust. "They'll come back," she said quietly. Her voice stayed steady despite everything she had endured. "With more men. With papers. Maybe even federal marshals who won't care about tribal law. Dakota lowered himself beside the fire, setting his rifle within easy reach. Flames danced across the curved lodge walls as he studied her face, seeing intelligence, exhaustion, and a core of iron that reminded him painfully of his sister. After a long moment, he spoke. "Tell me why they hunt you," he said. "Tell me what you did to earn the hatred of men with power." Clara Winrow's fingers tightened around the leather satchel still pressed to her chest. "My name is Clara Winrow," she said. "My father was Silas Winrow." She swallowed once before continuing. "He ran cattle and held mining interests near Crow's Landing. Everything was stable until Vance Mercer arrived last spring." The name struck Dakota like a blow. Mercer, the cattle baron whose reach had crept west year after year, backed by territorial law and hired guns. The same man whose riders had burned Standing Bear Creek. The same bullets that had taken Sierra. In recent months, travelers whispered of something else, of a lone figure near the ruins, leaving food and water for the desperate disappearing before anyone could approach. Some called it a guardian spirit. Dakota had dismissed it as grief-made myth. "You have proof he murdered your father?" he asked carefully. "I do." Clara tapped the satchel. Contracts he refused to honor. Records of debts he couldn't pay. Letters proving he was desperate. She drew a breath. "And there's more. A sworn statement from the doctor who examined my father's body. Dr. Henry Cole confirmed the truth. A bullet to the back. Not a riding accident." As the fire burned lower, Dakota reached to add another log. Clara noticed the way he favored his left shoulder. "You're injured," she said. "Old wound," he replied, dismissive. "From the night my sister died." His jaw tightened. "I tried to reach her when the shooting started. Flint Rourke's men pinned me down behind the horse corral. By the time I broke free, it was over." "I'm sorry," Clara said softly. "Losing family to violence. I understand that pain now." Dakota watched her through the firelight. Not just grief lived in her eyes, but controlled anger. Purpose. "What does Mercer want from you now?" he asked. "Why not kill you like your father?" "He needs me alive," Clara said, bitterness sharpening her voice. "Dead men can't claim debts. But a hysterical widow can have her property managed by a concerned husband." She let the words hang. "He's been spreading rumors that I'm unstable. Marriage would give him legal control over everything my father built. Then I'd suffer a very convenient accident." Footsteps approached the lodge. Dakota's hand shifted toward his rifle, but the voice outside was female, speaking Apache. "Dakota, may I enter?" "Come," he replied. The woman who stepped inside was not truly a grandmother, though everyone called her so. She was perhaps 50, hair streaked with gray and braided with beads, her face marked by both wisdom and wear. "This is Maiva Dakota," said to Clara. "She speaks for the Women's Council." Maiva studied Clara with calm precision. She set down a wooden bowl of stew and a cup of water within reach before seating herself across the fire. "She is afraid," Maiva said in accented English. "But not broken. That matters." "Broken women bring trouble," Maiva continued. "You will not bring trouble." "I won't," Clara said quickly. "I only need shelter until I can reach federal authorities." "Who?" Maiva asked sharply. "A school teacher named Agnes Crowley in Broken Creek," Clara replied. "She's documenting suspicious deaths of women across the territory, and Dr. Samuel Reed has been questioning medical rulings in several cases." Maiva exchanged a long look with Dakota. "These are white people who seek justice for Apache deaths, as well as white deaths," Maiva said. "I believe so," Clara answered. "They care about truth, not profit or politics." Maiva rose slowly. "We will see. For now you eat. Tomorrow we decide whether you stay or leave." After she departed, silence settled between Clara and Dakota. She ate the stew slowly, rich with meat and wild onions, unfamiliar yet comforting, reminding her of her mother's cooking. At last she spoke again. "The words you used earlier," she said quietly. "About what you said, Clara Winrow murmured. About belonging to you. What does that truly mean under your law? Dakota stirred the fire with a long stick sparks, lifting toward the smoke hole. It means you fall under the protection of my family, my clan and my people, he said evenly. No one harms you without facing all of us. He paused, choosing his words with care. It also means protection comes with responsibility. What kind? Clara asked. You contribute to the life of the camp, he answered. You respect our ways while you remain here. You speak truth in all things. His eyes met hers without wavering. And you trust our protection even when it feels uncertain. Clara nodded once. I can live with that. And when this ends, she asked quietly, when Vance Mercer is brought down or if I'm forced to leave. When that moment comes, you choose your own road, Dakota replied. What I offer is not captivity. It is shelter given freely with shared duty. And if I chose to stay, Clara asked, not just for safety, but permanently. The question settled between them, heavy with meaning neither was ready to claim. Firelight traced Dakota's features as he studied her face, something quickening in his chest despite himself. That would be... He hesitated. Complicated. He gave a faint, humorless breath. White women and Apache men don't usually build lives side by side. Maybe, Clara said softly. But nothing about this has been usual. Dakota broke the moment by lifting a thick buffalo robe and offering it to her. Rest now. Tomorrow carries enough trouble without borrowing from the future. As Clara settled onto the warm hides and listened to the steady rhythm of Dakota's breathing across the fire, her thoughts drifted away from pursuit and danger toward the fragile, impossible idea that this place might offer more than refuge. 20 miles away inside the polished study of his ranch house, Vance Mercer was planning her end with the precision of a man long accustomed to buying outcomes with money and blood. She couldn't have gone far on foot, Mercer said, leaning over a map spread across his desk. Flint. I want every trail, every creek, crossing searched. No gaps. We're already moving, Flint Rourke, replied a bandage, still covering the eye ruined by Clara's sand. She's sharp. Knows the land better than I figured. Sheriff Cole Hardin shifted in his chair, sweat darkening his collar despite the cool night air. Mr. Mercer. What if she's already reached federal ears? What if marshals are coming? Mercer's pale eyes fixed on him with icy contempt. Then you'd better pray they're the kind who understand cooperation. I've paid too much into this territory to let one hysterical woman tear it down. And the Apaches? Flint asked. Word is, she ran toward the camp on Ash River. If they're hiding her, then we give the army a reason to act, Mercer cut in. Burned homesteads, stolen cattle, maybe a dead family or two. The soldiers will clear that camp soon enough, and no one will ask what happened to one white woman in the chaos. Hardin's face drained of color, but he stayed silent. He had taken Mercer's money for too many years to find his conscience now. There's more, Flint said, pulling a folded telegram from his coat. From our man in the capital. That schoolteacher Agnes Crowley has been asking questions. She sent word to editors in Denver and Omaha. Mercer's jaw tightened as he read. Then Miss Crowley will suffer an accident. A tragic schoolhouse fire, perhaps. A devoted teacher dying while trying to save her students' work. And Dr. Samuel Reed Hardin asked quietly. Medical emergency, Mercer replied smoothly. Sudden heart failure. Frontier doctors pushed themselves too hard. As the three men laid out their campaign of intimidation and murder, none of them noticed the slender figure crouched outside the study window, listening to every word, fear hardening into resolve. 30 miles away in the modest cottage that doubled as the Broken Creek schoolhouse, Agnes Crowley was holding her own council of war with Dr. Samuel Reed. The middle-aged teacher had received Sierra's desperate message 3 days earlier, delivered by a farm boy paid a silver dollar to ask no questions. She's in grave danger, Samuel Agnes Crowley said, spreading Sierra's message across the worn kitchen table beside her own carefully organized notes. Vance Mercer has already murdered her father. If she threatens his empire, he won't hesitate to silence her. Dr. Samuel Reed adjusted his glasses and reviewed the documents with practiced focus. These medical reports are devastating, he said quietly, but they're incomplete. I've been investigating similar deaths on my own. The pattern is far worse than what you've gathered. How much worse? Agnes asked. At least 23 suspicious deaths over the past 4 years, Samuel replied, anger tightening his voice. Young women of means, married to Mercer's associates. Dead within months of their weddings. He continued, lowering his voice. I examined 3 bodies buried locally. Everyone showed signs of arsenic poisoning, yet the territorial coroner ruled each death natural. Agnes placed her pen down with a sharp tap. Then we must notify federal authorities. This is beyond territorial jurisdiction. I've already sent telegrams to the U.S. Marshal's office. Samuel nodded grimly. Federal investigations move slowly. Clara Winrow may not have that time. And if she's taken refuge with an Apache camp, Mercer will use that as justification for violence. Then we reach them first, Agnes said without hesitation. We warn them. We help them prepare. That's dangerous, Samuel warned. If Mercer's men catch us, then they catch us, she said firmly. Some things are worth the risk. In the territorial capital, Marshal Luke Grant stood alone in his office, reading telegrams that painted a disturbing portrait of corruption across Dakota Territory. He had seen frontier brutality before, but this was different, organized, methodical. Sir, said Evan Brooks, stepping into the doorway. The background reports you requested on Vance Mercer and his associates have arrived. Grant looked up. What did you find? Financial ties to at least 12 territorial officials, Brooks replied, including 2 judges and the territorial marshal. Grant's expression hardened. Continue. Mercer also holds interest in mining operations, rail construction, and land speculation across 3 territories. Grant scanned the ledgers, concern deepening. This isn't just murder for profit. No, Sir, Brooks said. This is structured corruption, control through violence. Grant exhaled slowly. How many federal laws? At minimum. Brooks answered, mail, fraud, conspiracy, bribery of federal officials, treaty violations, and interstate trafficking of stolen goods. That's before we consider murder. Grant reached for his hat and gun belt. Then we move now. Assemble a marshal team. Send word to Fort Robinson. I want a full cavalry company ready within 12 hours. Should we coordinate with territorial authorities? Brooks asked. Grant gave a thin professional smile. Given how many are on Mercer's payroll, no. This is federal now. Dawn broke cold and gray on October 16th. Hooves thundered across frozen ground as armed men assembled outside the Apache camp. At the front rode Sheriff Cole Hardin, flanked by Mercer's hired guns, 6 territorial deputies, and a man in a black suit whose bearing suggested federal authority, Earl Benton. Beside them rode Clara Winrow, guarded closely. Hardin's voice cut through the morning air. By order of the Dakota Territorial Court, you are commanded to surrender for questioning regarding livestock theft, destruction of property, and conspiracy with hostile Indians. Coda stepped from his lodge Winchester, resting calmly in his hands. Around him, Apache warriors took their positions with disciplined precision. Women ushered children inside. Elders gathered silently. Behind Coda, Kael moved toward the horse corral, where his Spencer rifle lay concealed. Taro positioned himself near the water source. Oran took cover behind the sweat lodge. Every man knew his place. This woman is under my protection by Apache law. Coda said, his English formal and unwavering. She has committed no crime on tribal land. Your heathen law don't mean a damn thing. Hardin spat, though uncertainty crept into his voice. The man in the black suit studied the camp, carefully counting rifles, measuring distances, calculating consequences. Actually, Sheriff Earl Benton said smoothly. The Indian Intercourse Act of 1834 clearly defines civil authority on tribal lands. You'll need proper federal warrants before making any arrests, the man in black said evenly. Sheriff Cole Hardin's face flushed with anger. Agent Morrison, this woman is a fugitive from territorial justice. She stole property, destroyed evidence, and conspired with hostile Indians. Has she been formally charged? The man interrupted calmly, tried and convicted in a court of law. Or are we discussing accusations brought by a private citizen with clear financial interests? Before Hardin could answer, another voice cut through the standoff. Perhaps I can clarify the legal situation. Samuel Reed rode into the clearing on a steady gray mare, his medical bag strapped behind the saddle, his expression set with professional resolve. He had been making morning rounds when word reached him of armed men gathering at the Apache camp. His arrival was no accident. He had been quietly examining Vance Mercer's activities for months, troubled by a growing pattern of unexplained deaths. Dr. Reed Earl Benton said, nodding with thin respect. What brings you here at this hour, medical duty? Reed replied as he dismounted. And civic responsibility. I have been treating Clara Winrow for injuries sustained while fleeing what can only be described as an attempted kidnapping and coerced marriage. That is a serious claim, Benton said carefully. It is a serious crime, Reed answered without hesitation. One that fits a disturbing pattern involving Mr. Mercer and several other young women of means across this territory. The words rippled through the assembled lawmen. Hardin's hand twitched toward his revolver, but Benton's sharp glance stopped him. What pattern are you alleging? Dr. Benton asked, interest sharpening. Reed reached into his coat and removed a folded document, handling it like evidence meant to stand on its own. A preliminary report prepared for the governor's office. 9 suspicious deaths over the past 3 years, recently married women, all heirs to valuable property, all dead within 6 months of ceremonies, performed by associates of Mr. Mercer. That's nonsense, Hardin snapped, though his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Reed replied calmly. Then explain why 3 independent physicians documented clear signs of arsenic poisoning in bodies officially declared victims of accidents or sudden illness. The camp fell quiet. Benton's face stilled the look of a man realizing the ground beneath him had shifted. Yet in his pale eyes there was calculation rather than concern. Doctor, he said slowly, are you formally alleging a conspiracy involving murder for financial gain? I am stating it plainly, Reed replied. And I have documentation to support every claim. At that moment, Clara Winrow stepped from the lodge. Her chin was lifted despite her torn dress and tangled hair. Morning light revealed the cuts on her hands from hard riding and the bruises left by the wagon wreck, but also a resolve untouched by pain. Dr. Reed is telling the truth, she said clearly, her voice carrying across the clearing. Vance Mercer murdered my father to avoid paying his debts. Now he wants me dead so he can steal what my father spent his life building. That's a grave accusation, Hardin said, though his bluster had thinned. You'd better have proof. Clara knelt, opened her father's leather satchel, and removed a thick bundle of papers. Contracts showing Mercer owed Silas Winrow more than $40,000 in cattle and mining equipment. Bank records proving he couldn't pay without selling land already mortgaged to other investors. She held up a single page. And this, Dr. Henry Cole's full medical report. It states clearly that my father died from a gunshot wound to the back. Not a riding accident, as Mercer told the authorities. Earl Benton stepped closer to inspect the papers. Something in his manner made Clara retreat a pace. The professionalism was gone, replaced by something sharp and predatory that reminded her of Mercer himself. Miss Winrow, Benton said with practiced sympathy, I can see you've suffered greatly. Perhaps you should come with me to a secure location where we can discuss these matters properly. Clara's answer was immediate. I am perfectly safe here. Clara answered without hesitation, stepping closer to Coda's solid presence. Before tempers could flare further, Another voice cut in from the edge of the clearing. Perhaps these accusations should be addressed together. Heads turned as Agnes Crowley rode forward on her sturdy mare. Her graying hair was pulled tight, her expression set with the stern resolve of a schoolteacher who had uncovered deliberate wrongdoing. She had been investigating Vance Mercer's operations on her own, collecting testimony from grieving families and keeping careful records of patterns others preferred not to see. Miss Crowley, Earl Benton said, nodding with visible discomfort. "What brings you this far from Broken Creek?" Agnes studied the supposed federal agent with open suspicion. "I received word there might be trouble," she said evenly, "and I came to assist legitimate federal authorities." The emphasis on legitimate was unmistakable. She reached into her saddlebag and removed a thick leather-bound journal. 19 suspicious deaths over the past 4 years, she said, opening it. Names, dates, witness statements, and financial records. All young women of significant property. All married to men directly tied to Mercer's business interests. All dead within 8 months of their weddings. "This is absurd," Sheriff Cole Hardin snapped, though his voice faltered. "Is it?" Agnes fixed him with a withering stare. "Then explain why you refuse to investigate a single one. Explain why every death was ruled accidental, despite medical evidence suggesting otherwise. And perhaps a new voice added from behind the group, you can explain why you're impersonating a federal officer." Everyone turned. Marshal Luke Grant approached at the head of a squad of U.S. Marshals, cavalry troopers from Fort Robinson riding close behind. He was younger and taller than the impostor, his authority unmistakable. Earl Benton Grant said sharply, "You are under arrest for conspiracy, multiple counts of murder, impersonation of a federal officer, and several dozen additional federal crimes." Benton bolted for his horse, but marshals tackled him before he could take 2 steps. As they hauled him upright, his fine suit and polished manners fell away, revealing panic beneath. "This is insanity," Hardin protested. "That man showed credentials. I've seen them." "Forged," Grant replied coldly, "along with his commission and warrants. We've been tracking this impersonation for weeks." Shock rippled through both camps. Clara's legs nearly gave out, relief and fear crashing through her at once. They had been seconds from disaster, spared only by the arrival of real federal authority. But Vance Mercer was still free. "Where is Mercer now?" Grant demanded, turning on Hardin. I don't know," Hardin stammered, sweat pouring down his face. "You do," Grant said, his voice iron hard, "and you will tell us. Federal conspiracy charges carry the gallows. Your only chance is full cooperation." As marshals secured prisoners and formed a defensive perimeter, Dakota stepped to Clara's side, concern darkening his eyes. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. "No," she said, her voice shaking as the tension caught up with her. "But we're not safe. Mercer won't stop. He'll try something worse." Her warning came too late. Shouts rose from the perimeter as riders appeared from multiple directions. Mercer had anticipated federal intervention and prepared a final desperate strike. Riders from the South Kyle called from the corral. 20 at least. Heavily armed. More from the east, Oran added. "They're carrying torches." Grant scanned the terrain quickly. "How many warriors can you field?" 15, maybe 20 if we arm the younger men," Dakota replied. "But we know this land better than they do." Grant nodded grimly. "My marshals can fight, but we're outnumbered." The camp braced itself as hooves thundered closer. The first sparks of Mercer's final gamble glowing in the distance. "We're outnumbered," Marshal Luke Grant admitted after a rapid assessment. "If Mercer's brought his full force, then we hold them here," Dakota said calmly. "This is our land, our people, our stand." As preparations were made and rifles checked, Clara Winrow found her thoughts drifting away from the tightening ring of danger to the path that had carried her here, her father's murder, the frantic escape, the unexpected shelter inside an Apache lodge. Every step had led to this moment. a final line drawn between justice and corruption, between truth and greed. "No matter what happens," Clara said quietly, as she helped stack cover stones, "I don't regret coming here. You saved my life when I had nothing left. You gave me hope. And you gave me something worth fighting for," Coda replied, checking his rifle. "Something beyond vengeance. Whatever comes, we face it together." The clash, when it erupted, was swift and decisive. Mercer's men, expecting frightened villagers, instead met disciplined federal marshals, supported by Apache warriors who knew every rise tree and creek bend. Torches meant to burn, the camp were turned against their bearers when Kyle and his companions swept in from behind, shattering the attackers' formation. Then the balance shifted completely. From the creek bed emerged a slender figure, rifle-smoking Coda's sister, very much alive. She carried information that would finish Mercer's empire forever. "Sira," Coda breathed as she stepped into the clearing. "Hello, brother," she said simply. "I've waited a long time for this." There was no time for reunion. As Mercer's men scattered or surrendered, Vance Mercer himself appeared at the edge of the camp with a handful of loyal gunmen, including Flint Rourke. In his hand burned a stick of dynamite fuse, hissing softly, aimed to punish any attempt to stop him. Impressive, Mercer called out smoothly. "But this ends now." His eyes shone with the desperation of a man stripped of options. "You've destroyed my operation, ruined my name, and killed my men. But I still have enough powder here to take half this camp with me." He lifted the dynamite slightly. "Give me the woman and the papers. I walk away. Refuse, and everyone dies." Marshal Grant started forward, but Clara stepped out first. "I'll go with you," she said clearly. "If you let everyone else walk free." Clara Nakota moved to stop her. "It's the only way," she said over her shoulder. "I won't trade innocent lives for my own." As she approached Mercer, her fingers closed around a small glass vial. Dr. Samuel Reed had given her nitroglycerin, meant for heart patients, but dangerous in skilled hands. "Close enough," Mercer warned. "Throw the documents here." Instead, Clara hurled the vial at his feet. The blast was sharp, not as devastating as the dynamite, but enough to throw Mercer off balance and snuff the burning fuse. In the chaos that followed, marshals and Apache warriors moved as one. Flint Rourke fired once before Kyle's Spencer carbine ended his career forever. The remaining gunmen surrendered when they realized Mercer could no longer protect or pay them. Mercer survived the explosion, but badly wounded. Heavy shackles closed around his wrists as marshals hauled him upright. "You think you've won," he snarled, blood streaking his face. "There will always be men like me," maybe Clara said, quietly standing over him. "But they'll have to face people like us. And we're not as easy to crush as you believed." The trials lasted 6 weeks and drew reporters from across the nation. Vance Mercer, confronted with overwhelming evidence of murder and conspiracy, maintained his innocence to the end. Dozens of witnesses testified. Documents laid bare a system built on fear and blood. Sheriff Cole Hardin's confession proved devastating. $200 per family, he said from the stand, his voice barely audible. "That's what Mercer paid me to drive them off their land." The courtroom fell silent as the truth finally claimed the territory Mercer had tried to own. $500 for every woman I delivered to Mercer's associates for marriage, Sheriff Cole Hardin admitted under oath, and 1,000 more for every death that needed to be labeled an accident. "And how many deaths did you knowingly ignore?" the federal prosecutor asked. 23, that I can say for certain," Hardin replied, his voice hollow. "Possibly more. Mercer didn't share everything with me." The courtroom stiffened as the next witness took the stand. Sira, the woman believed dead for 2 years, spoke with the weight of someone who had survived the grave itself. Her testimony cut deeper than any document. "After the bullet knocked me unconscious," she said steadily, "I woke buried beneath the bodies of my family and friends. I crawled into the woods and hid there for days, barely alive. She paused, then continued. When I recovered enough to think clearly, I realized everyone believed I was dead. I chose to use that belief. And how did you survive undiscovered for 2 years? The prosecutor asked. There are many places to disappear in the Badlands, Sierra replied. And there are people white and Apache who helped when they could. She described food and water left at dangerous river crossings. Broken wagon wheels mended in the night. People began calling it a guardian spirit, she said. That was me. And during this time, you gathered evidence. I watched. I followed Mercer's men. I learned to read and write English well enough to understand contracts and court papers. I waited for the moment when the truth would matter. When Clara Winrow took the stand, her testimony widened the scope of the trial beyond her own suffering. He told me my father's death was necessary, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the packed courtroom. That cooperation was healthier than resistance, that anyone who opposed his idea of progress would suffer. The verdicts were unanimous. Vance Mercer, Flint Rourke, Sheriff Cole Hardin, and 4 other conspirators were sentenced to hang. The executions were carried out on December 15, 1879, closing a chapter of blood and corruption that had poisoned the territory for years. With justice finally served, Clara faced a different decision: what to do with her father's restored land and with her own future. The answer came during a meeting in Crow's Landing's rebuilt church. Clara stood before farmers, ranchers, and townspeople who bore the scars of Mercer's reign. I want to build something different here, she said. Not just another ranch or business, but a real community. One where different peoples work together for shared benefit. What kind of community? Asked Jonah Pierce, a homesteader whose family had been driven off their land. One built on cooperation instead of competition, Clara answered. Shared resources, mutual protection, a common purpose. My father's land can be the foundation, but it would belong to everyone who chooses to participate. Dr. Samuel Reed, whose role in exposing Mercer's crimes had earned national respect, nodded. Pooled resources could support proper medical care, schools for all children. Shared grazing rights would benefit both settlers and Apache families. Agnes Crowley added, if there's willingness on both sides. All eyes turned to Coda, who had been listening quietly near the back of the church. He rose slowly, his presence commanding silence. My people believe the earth belongs to all living things, he said carefully. No one owns the water, the grass, the sky, or the animals that depend on them. He paused. We understand white law sees ownership differently. This would not erase that law. It would change how what is owned is used together, not apart. Coda inclined his head. We would consider such an agreement if it is built on respect and equality, not charity. Respect cuts both ways, Jonah Pierce said firmly. We've seen what fighting brings. I'm ready to try something better. The vote was close, 54 in favor, 41 opposed, but decisive. The Ash River community was formally established on January 1, 1880. In the months that followed, families from across the region joined, bound not by fear, but by shared hardship and a future chosen together. The physical labor of building a shared settlement was demanding, but the emotional and social work proved far harder. Decades of fear, resentment, and violence could not be erased by a signature on an agreement. Trust did not grow overnight. Arguments flared. Progress stalled. There were weeks when the entire vision seemed ready to collapse beneath old habits and buried anger. The first true test came during the winter of 1881, when a brutal blizzard severed contact between settlements and threatened the community's carefully balanced shared supplies. Fear returned quickly. Some families began hiding food and fuel instinct, overpowering promise. Maybe this whole idea was a mistake, Clara Winrow said one bitter night as she and Coda sat close to the fire inside the cabin they had built together. They had married earlier that spring in a ceremony blending Apache and settler traditions, a union meant to symbolize what the community hoped to become. People are different, Coda replied. feeding another log into the flames, just like the fingers on a hand, each one shaped for its own task. But when danger comes, they move together. And when the danger passes, he added quietly, they rest, but they are still part of the same hand. Spring eventually returned. The crisis eased. What had been strained began to heal. Fences were repaired, wooden ones, and others harder to see. The settlement's first integrated school opened soon after, taught by Agnes Crowley, welcoming children from both settler and Apache families. Dr. Samuel Reed's practice grew into a full clinic serving the region without regard for race or ability to pay. Their daughter, Lakota, was born during a late-season snowstorm on March 15, 1883. She arrived with her mother's green eyes and her father's dark hair. From the moment she was placed in Clara's arms, she became a living symbol of the future they were building. She'll never know the world we came from, Clara said softly one afternoon, nursing the baby on the porch while families from both cultures worked the fields together. She'll help shape the world we're becoming, Coda replied gently, closing his fingers around Ellen's tiny hand. Each generation builds on the last, but each one also gets the chance to do better. By 1890, the Ash River community had become something rare in the American West, a truly integrated settlement where shared responsibility had replaced rigid boundaries. Visitors arrived from across the country. Newspapers carried stories of their cooperation far beyond the territory. Their greatest trial came during the economic collapse of 1893. As banks failed and businesses crumbled nationwide, Ash River's cooperative system softened the blow, but it could not prevent hardship entirely. Several families lost everything when outside investments failed. Community reserves were stretched thin as requests for help multiplied. For the first time since its founding, dissolution became a real possibility. This is when we learned who we truly are, Clara told the emergency council. Now 39, with threads of silver beginning to show in her dark hair, she had become the settlement's quiet anchor through years of growth and strain. When times are easy, cooperation comes naturally, she continued. When times are hard, it becomes a choice and a sacrifice. The community chose cooperation. Those with means shared with those without. Strong enterprises supported struggling ones. Individuals worked longer hours to meet collective needs, while the community carried those facing personal loss. Nobody gets left behind became their unspoken creed. We rise together, or we fall together. The approach held. By 1896, Ash River had survived the Depression and emerged stronger. Shared sacrifice had deepened trust and proved the practical strength of cooperation under pressure. We've shown that it works, Doctor, Samuel Reed said during the celebration, marking the end of the crisis. Now in his 60s, still practicing medicine with tireless devotion, he had become a respected figure both for exposing Mercer's crimes and helping build what replaced them. We've shown it can work here, Coda added calmly. Whether it can work elsewhere with different people and different struggles, that remains to be seen. His words proved prophetic. As the 19th century drew to a close, delegations began arriving from universities, government offices, and reform groups across the United States and Europe. Ash River's success had captured international attention as a possible model for confronting racial division and economic inequality in a rapidly changing world. Some who tried to follow their path would succeed brilliantly. Others failed spectacularly. The difference Clara Winrow and Coda learned through hard years and harder lessons did not rest in systems or written plans, but in a simple truth: people must be willing to place shared good above personal gain. Cooperation cannot be commanded. You can't impose it from the outside, Clara told a visiting group of German social reformers in 1899. It has to grow from within, from shared need and earned trust. You can shape the conditions, but you can't force the choice. As the new century approached, Clara and Coda often found themselves looking back on the long road from that desperate night in 1879 to their place now as respected elders of a strong, integrated community. They had proven that love could cross any boundary, that partnership could outlast fear, and that people from different worlds could build something lasting together. Their daughter Lakota, now 17 and standing on the edge of adulthood, had grown up in a world her parents had helped shape, but never could have imagined in their youth. To her, integration was not an achievement, it was simply life as it was meant to be, something to protect and improve, not question. "What are you most proud of?" Clara asked one quiet evening as they sat on their porch, watching Elin laugh and run with neighborhood children, drawn from every culture and background in the settlement. "That she doesn't see the differences the way we once did." Dakota said, his arm settling naturally around his wife's shoulders after nearly 20 years of marriage, tested by struggle and sacrifice. "For her, this is just normal, which means we succeeded," Clara replied softly. "We changed what normal looks like." The words once spoken in crisis, "You belong to me now," had transformed into something chosen, something shared. We belong to each other, and to something greater than ourselves. In building both their marriage and their community, they had created a legacy that would endure beyond their own lifetimes. Proof that different peoples could work together to create something better than what came before. The storm that had first bound them together in fear and violence had long since passed, replaced by the calm that follows hard-won victory and the quiet fulfillment of a life devoted to justice, love, and the radical belief that cooperation is stronger than conflict, understanding more powerful than hate, and that two people working side by side with shared purpose can in fact change the world. Thank you. All stories are created for entertainment purposes and may include fictional elements or dramatized interpretations inspired by historical settings. We use AI tools, voiceover visuals, scripts as creative assistants. However, all content is reviewed, refined, and edited by humans to ensure emotional authenticity and storytelling quality. We fully comply with YouTube's policies regarding AI-generated content and do not use any deep-fake techniques or misleading recreations of real individuals. All visuals and supporting materials are properly licensed. Sharing, re-uploading, modifying, or distributing any part of this content in any form requires written permission. We appreciate your support and respect for original creative work.